Welcome everyone to the Collaborative Mentoring Webinar Series, and thank you for joining us today. We will be talking about how to maximize the benefit and impact of corporate partnerships for all stakeholders involved. I'm Audrey Love-Siegfried from Mentor Colorado, and I will be facilitating today's session. Melissa Seidenberg, Program Associate with Mentor, the National Mentoring Partnership, will be moderating the question panel. And finally, Jennifer Burgoyne, Program Manager at Mentor, the National Mentoring Partnership, will be running the presentation slides today. This series is supported by Mentor, the National Mentoring Partnership. Mentor remains a tremendous resource for the mentoring field as we strive to increase mentoring excellence everywhere. These webinars would not be possible without our awesome planning and facilitation team and funding from the National Mentoring Resource Center. We have facilitators from the state partnerships shown on this slide. We encourage you to check out your state partnership for more resources. In addition to this webinar series, the NMRC provides resources such as free technical assistance and training for mentoring champions just like you. At the end of this webinar, we'll provide more details about how you can access this free support. This webinar is going to be great, and we want you to have what you need to do this work. In 1 week, you will receive an email with information about how to download a copy of these slides and view the webinar recording. You can also access this information directly by going to Mentor's website. To continually improve this series, we're looking for your input. A short survey will pop up as you exit this webinar. Please take just 3 minutes to give us your feedback. We hope you have tons of questions for our expert panelists. Use the tab in your dashboard labeled questions and send them throughout the webinar as you think of them. Melissa will be queuing up the top ones to share with panelists at the end of the webinar. We can't get to them all because there are many of you on this webinar, so the questions that we share with our panelists will generally be ones that broaden or deepen the conversation. Please keep in mind that we can't address specific needs of individual programs during this time. So if we don't get to what your question is or you have specific questions about your individual programs, we just encourage you to follow up with our panelists directly. So first, to get a sense of who is with us today, we have 2 short polls. So the first poll we have is, what is your experience level in the mentoring field? So get those final submissions in. Okay, so it looks like 40% of our callers are beginners. We have 53% who are experienced and 8% who would define themselves as experts. So we have a really great mix of people, and hopefully our panelists will be able to provide a lot of information throughout the day. Okay, and so then let's look at our second poll, and what is your role in the mentoring field specifically? So are you a practitioner, a researcher, technical assistance provider, a funder, or other? So get those final responses in. Okay, so it looks like the vast majority of our callers today are practitioners, and then we have 4% researchers, 3% technical assistance providers, 5% funders, and 35% others. So it looks like we have a lot of other people joining us as well, which is fantastic. So thank you all for being here. All right, so let's check out our panel for today's webinar. We have 4 excellent speakers with diverse backgrounds, experiences, and lenses into the world of corporate partnership. We hope these different perspectives will provide you with great ideas to really enhance and augment your programs and your corporate partnerships, both the current corporate partnerships as well as your future corporate partnerships. So first up, Daniel Horgan is a corporate partnerships consultant with Mentor, the National Mentoring Partnership. Daniel has over 17 years of experience working in the public and private sectors, having served as the Executive Director of Generation On, the Vice President of Development at the Heart of America Foundation, the Senior Director of Community Affairs at Capital One, the Youth Program Officer at Three Rivers Workforce Investment Board, and the Executive Director of Pittsburgh Cares. Through partnerships with local and national consulting firms, along with his own practice, the DG Horgan Group, Daniel has worked with Fortune 500 companies, national and local nonprofit organizations, school districts, and government agencies to support leadership, organizational, and program development. Daniel is the author of Tell Me I Can't and I Will. Welcome, Daniel. Thank you so much for being with us. Next up, Meredith leads Deloitte's education strategy RightStep, which is focused on helping low-income students pursue successfully through school into careers. Part of her role, she manages Deloitte's integrated relationships with national leading education nonprofits. She facilitated the first ever Innovation Prize and launched a virtual mentoring program which will enable Deloitte to engage with low-income students at scale. Over her 8 years with Deloitte, she has managed an array of programs as part of the corporate citizenship portfolio, including Deloitte's National Pro Bono Initiative, which has delivered more than 1,200 pro bono projects, engaging over 5,000 professionals and clocking more than 400,000 client service hours. Previously, she held various positions in the media and entertainment industry. She worked at Spike TV and launched her career as an NBC page in New York. Meredith still lives in New York City with her husband and 2 daughters. She graduated with a BA in American Studies from Cornell University. Meredith, would you mind sharing a bit more about RightStep before we go on to our next panelist?
Sure, I'm happy to. Hi, everyone, and it's great to be here. Thanks so much for the opportunity. So RightStep at Deloitte is how we've branded our overall commitment in education to the community. So it really encompasses how, as a firm, we're focused on helping low-income students persist through high school, college, and transition successfully to a career. And RightStep is really just a movement that we've developed both internally and externally focused on this particular education commitment. And we have expressions both at a national and a local level. So at a national level, we're supporting 4 organizations, which you see on this slide here: City Year, College Summit, Reasoning Minds, and the Posse Foundation. And also, we're launching sort of more homegrown programs. So most recently, we launched the virtual mentoring program, which was mentioned in my bio, and we also have a number of marketplace activities happening. We recognize that what works well in our New York community may look different as far as what works in Detroit. So our marketplaces have a lot of flexibility in the organizations they work with and how they make this particular education difference in their communities and where they choose to focus. I would just make one more comment where mentoring is certainly the topic we're here to talk about today, and mentoring is really at the center of what we think about connected to RightStep. Our big audacious goal for this year is getting 10,000 people involved in our RightStep activities, primarily as mentors. We're doing that through a number of different ways through our homegrown programming, and virtual mentoring is a big vehicle for us because we really feel like the way that we can make the most substantive difference in our community is actually mobilizing our people as mentors.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Meredith. Now up, Ashlee. Ashlee originally joined Communities in Schools National in 2008 as an intern at Communities in Schools of Richmond. From there, she joined the national office team and is most recently settled into a new role as Manager of Student Supports and Partnerships. In this role, Ashlee focuses on grant program management and researching, developing and managing all national partners. Ashlee has a bachelor's degree in community health education from Virginia Commonwealth University in Richmond, Virginia, and works remotely for the national office from Charlotte, North Carolina. In her free time, you can find her volunteering for a local dog rescue, playing with her 2 rescue pups, and navigating her way through being a new mom. Thank you so much for joining us, Ashlee. And finally, our last panelist we have is Pam Giller. A passion for mission-focused organizations, innovation, and fundraising brought Pamela to Communities in Schools as the Director of Corporate Relations. Pamela joins the organization with a decade of experience in the nonprofit sector, including with Share Our Strength and Food and Friends. Her undergraduate degree in Peace and Conflict Studies, coupled with a master's in Public Administration, has instilled a deep commitment to cross-sector collaboration and collective impact. Rarely unable to help herself when an opportunity arises to support a worthy cause, Pamela volunteers her time with Generation Hope, generating resources to help young parents succeed in college, and is an active member of the Association for Fundraising Professionals.
Hi, Audrey. Can you hear us?
Yes, I seem to have lost my internet connection. I'm so sorry.
Oh, no worries. We've got that overview slide up.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much. So thank you to all of our panelists for being here. I'm so sorry about these small technology glitches. I hope that I'll be able to get up and running shortly. But Jen, if you wouldn't mind just letting me know when we're moving on to the next slides. So again, thank you panelists for being here. Today we're going to have the opportunity to check out what goes into developing strong and beneficial corporate partnerships. So I'm super excited to be a part of this conversation because we know that corporate partnerships done well can have an enormous impact on our ability to serve youth. So today we're going to be looking at how to explore alignment successfully and why this is such an important aspect of creating corporate partnerships that work. We'll be looking at relationship building and management, what goes into really creating that effective relationship, and then how do you manage that over time? How do you grow with your partners and really make sure that you have the most beneficial relationships that you can? And then finally, we all know that it can be really difficult in some of these corporate partnerships. So we'll be assessing impact and understanding how to assess the impact and the benefit of this. And then also looking at how to navigate challenges, because we all know that challenges will come up as we go through these relationships.
All right, next slide, Audrey.
Okay, excellent. So we're looking at exploring alignment first. So my first question is really going to be about what are the key factors that go into developing an effective corporate partnership? What is the importance of alignment in a partnership? Daniel, do you want to start us off on this?
Sure. Thanks, Audrey. So in terms of the factors that go into developing an effective corporate partnership, I would start us off by sharing just 3 core things that I've really identified through my experience in both managing corporate relationships as well as developing them. The first is to really focus on building the relationship versus focusing in on a transaction. And by a transaction, I mean, oftentimes as nonprofit organizations and programs, we're interested in securing sponsorship dollars, we're interested in recruiting mentors for our programs, and it can come across in the cultivation and that initial relationship building stage as you are just focused on that particular transaction versus building a longer term relationship that's going to be more sustainable for the long haul. So really focusing on building relationships with multiple champions within a company would be at the top of my list in terms of things to focus on. The second would be to really focus on aligning with those corporate partnerships in terms of your goals as well as your expectations and being really transparent with that information up front. So being clear about what it is you're aiming to accomplish in your programs and really asking thoughtful questions of your corporate partner that you're engaging in conversations with to understand what their specific goals and expectations of their partnerships are as well. And then the third at the top of my list would just be patience. The reality is that really sustainable and what I would term impact-driven relationships take a lot of time to develop. Again, because if you're going to build, manage, and sustain ultimately the relationship with that corporate partner, putting in the time up front to really get to know one another and to understand where each other is coming from goes a long, long way in terms of the longer-term success that you're after.
Awesome. Thank you, Daniel. And then Meredith, did you have some thoughts on this as well as to what key factors go into developing an effective corporate partnership and why there's such an importance in alignment?
Yeah, so I would just say as a professional services organization, we really think about entering into these types of relationships just like we do in our client work. So it's truly a two-way conversation to understand, when we're working with a particular nonprofit to understand what their needs are, and we want to meet them where they are. Certainly echo everything Dan said. I mean, the holy grail for us at Deloitte is when we are working with an organization that may have already gotten traction, may have built their own champions within Deloitte, whether it be at a more junior level, at a more senior level, as a board member, and that really helps. There's only so much in my role in corporate citizenship that I can do to drive relationships, and it really takes hold once we have a number of folks involved who can really attest to the value of the relationship. But certainly, getting on the same page and understanding what both parties want to achieve out of the relationship is so critical.
Excellent. Thank you, Meredith. And so on our next question, how can a mentoring program examine its own organizational identity and needs before really delving into this process? Daniel, you want to kick us off with this one as well, since you have this really awesome organizational identity tree tool for organizations to kind of think about these various things.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think some people might be wondering, why are we talking about organizational identity and needs when it comes to corporate partnership building? And I use the tree analogy to really call out the importance of being mindful of who you are as an organization and what specifically grounds you as an organization in terms of your identity before you go out and try to develop or evolve relationships with companies. It really helps you as an organization and a program to avoid mission drift. And it also helps you to go into the partnership with being as specific as possible. When I worked at Capital One, we often had nonprofit organizations that would call us up and want to meet with us to talk about community investment or employee engagement, and they would specifically say things like, we're interested in generating more revenue to expand our program. And when we would push and try to understand what expansion looked like or what scale looked like, there really wasn't a defined metric of success in that regard. And so my advice in terms of organizational identity is the more clear that you can be in what it is that you stand for and what it is you're trying to achieve, the more likely it's going to be clear in any corporate partnership exploration whether it's a good fit or not. And so I use the tree analogy as an opportunity for us to reflect on the trunk, which is the most solid part of a tree, right, is the mission of your organization. So being very grounded in that mission and being very clear about what it is you're aiming to achieve. The roots, to me, really represent three core things. It's the values that really run throughout the decisions and the work that you do as an organization, the culture that you create within your organization, within your staff, within your board and volunteer base. The programs that really, again, sort of ground you underneath that mission that help you to be clear from the roots up about what it is that you're going after in your individual programs, and the target audience. So again, being super clear about who it is that you're trying to reach and engage, whether it's the young people specifically that you're trying to engage in mentoring relationships, or if you're particularly trying to target or bring into the organization particular types of mentors that you feel like will be most successful. So those are the roots. And then the branches really represent two things. One is what you can branch out and provide to companies in terms of the value add, which I know we're going to talk about in a little bit, but really being mindful of what it is that you feel like you can contribute in return to a corporate partner. And on the flip side, what your wants and needs are, which is essentially what are you looking for in that relationship with the company that you're trying to build a partnership with. The more clearly and consistently you can communicate that across your team, making sure that each person in your organization, whether they're on your board or on your staff or a volunteer ambassador, they're all using similar language and referring to the same content is really, really important. And being able as an organization to revisit or reflect on that information, that organizational identity, on a somewhat regular basis, again, keeps everybody in the organization grounded in that identity to build more solid partnerships longer term.
Excellent. Thank you, Daniel. I think that will be very helpful for a number of our organizations. Pam, could you share your thoughts on this as well, of how mentoring programs can examine its organizational identity and needs?
Sure, I would be happy to. And I love Daniel's organizational identity tree. I hadn't seen that before, and I think that's such a useful tool. Communities in Schools actually did something really similar just this past year. We went through an exercise to identify and really flesh out our organizational brand identity. And as a reminder, Communities in Schools is about 40 years old, so it's never too late to do this work and put some thinking behind who the organization is and what we represent. So kind of similar to the tree, we went through an exercise where we attempted to describe our organizational brand identity as a person. So we essentially wrote up a bio for what Communities in Schools brand would look like, sound like, talk like, walk like. And that really helped drive some great conversations around what kind of partner would this person have, what kind of organizations would be an authentic match this personality and what type of partnership would really enhance this person's efforts and goals.
Okay, great. Thank you, Pam. So now thinking about the actual kind of corporations that we should be targeting, Meredith, could you share a little bit about what corporate partners you think that mentoring programs should specifically be looking for, looking at when considering these corporate partnerships?
Sure. So I think there's been a great evolution of corporate citizenship and engagement. Going back probably 10 years ago, I think most companies on the corporate side were simply writing a check, and obviously the field has changed and evolved significantly. And I certainly can say this for Deloitte, but we're not alone in this. Many other companies think about it this way as well. I mean, we truly think about what we can do beyond writing a check, and I would say, as the #1 criteria, looking for corporations that value engagement and are truly looking to work side by side with an organization is the sign of a good corporate partner. So I certainly can speak from our experience, and again, there's no shortage of companies like this in the field, but companies that are interested in truly integrated relationships. For us, when we get involved with an organization, we're looking for how we can get across all various ways you could think of: giving money, providing pro bono support, providing our people as volunteers. Those are all things that we look for to prioritize. And I would say, looking at the profile of companies, seeing and understanding how they engage with other like organizations, I think is a good indicator of the type of corporate partner they will be when you can get a sense of how integrated their relationships might be with other organizations.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Meredith. Daniel, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I would just build on what Meredith just shared. And, companies that are looking for a multifaceted partnership that goes across all those different spaces, from volunteerism to financial investments, et cetera, board leadership, is a partner that, again, is going to be much more sustainable and longer term. I think there's essentially sort of 3 different buckets, if you will, that you could look at today in terms of the wide landscape of corporations that might be in your community. How do you start to identify or prioritize which ones to approach? The first is where there's alignment with a corporate social responsibility or a corporate citizenship strategy. So in terms of your research, if you start to identify companies are interested in investing in, both in terms of time and treasure, in education, workforce development, community development at large, those are really good indicators that mentoring will likely be aligned or could be clearly aligned in terms of how you cultivate the relationship and how you make the pitch to helping them achieve those particular community alignment goals. The second is really aligning with the business goals. So a lot of companies, as Meredith said, have evolved and are really looking at this corporate citizenship work from a couple different lenses. It's not just how are we meeting community needs, but now it's also how are we also meeting business goals. So things like, how does mentoring inside the company play out in terms of their own value system? So for example, I've had the pleasure of working with Meredith and the Deloitte team. Mentoring is something that the employees at Deloitte really value. It's part of the culture at Deloitte. So for them to engage in and really position themselves as a leader in the mentoring field makes a ton of sense, both from a business perspective as well as from a community point of view. The second is, again, when I worked at Capital One, we had external regulations as a financial institution. So there are certain regulations that require financial institutions to invest in particular demographic communities. And something called the Community Reinvestment Act puts a particular goal for any financial institution to focus in on where they're investing both their time and for their employees as well as their finances. And so thinking about what those regulations are and how mentoring helps a company to achieve those regulations can again showcase how you're bringing value to that company. The third would just be employee skills and interests. I've had the opportunity to work with Ernst & Young, EY, and one of the things that they do really well is, in addition to measuring community impact, they also are assessing the role, or the impact of mentoring on their employees' skills. So they have a criteria essentially of 12 different leadership competencies and have shown a positive correlation between the mentoring experiences of their employees and the leadership skill development that those employees are having compared to others that are not engaging in mentoring. So again, you can showcase the fact that mentoring is in fact a professional development strategy for a company while also meeting a very particular community need.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Daniel. So let's look at vetting, right? So vetting our potential corporate partners that we have. So first, kind of from the corporate perspective, what are you looking for, Meredith, when you're vetting potential programs to support?
So I think we're truly looking for partners, and not to be too repetitive in what I share, but I do think it's an important part to emphasize, and that we're looking for partners just as we're going to be flexible in how we think about applying the skills of our professionals and getting people involved. We're looking for a partner who's going to be flexible on their side as well and think creatively with us, truly think about solution-oriented ways that we can work together. And just an example that I'll give just to be more specific, so we're a professional services organization. Our people are constantly on the road, and many of them are not in the same place in the same time for 4 days a week. And then they're home on Fridays in their home office, but oftentimes, have a lot that they're trying to get done on Fridays, and may have family and personal needs. So that leaves them with very limited time, for example, to mentor. So, often what we're looking for in an organization is an organization that's creative to think about how do we navigate that? How can we make opportunities more appealing to our people and make them feel accessible? So I'd say truly we're truly looking for organizations that are flexible in that respect. And I think we're also looking for an organization that can demonstrate results. Maybe stating the obvious, but an organization with a track record of success that can demonstrate tangibly the type of impact that they're having both on the beneficiaries they're serving in the communities and also the value they're bringing back to the corporate partners they're working with. So, do the mentors involved report having a great experience? Are they happier with the companies where they work as a result of their getting involved with this particular organization? And again, at the end of the day, the social impact that the organization is having is super important, and an organization's ability to articulate that very clearly is critical to us, and really helps us build the case both for participation from our people and also for our leadership to get on board and get excited about an organization that we're considering working with.
Great. Now, from the other side of things, from the program perspective, Ashlee, could you share a little bit with us about your vetting process at Communities at Schools? Because Communities in Schools has this really robust kind of partnership vetting process, and I think that this could be an excellent model for some of our programs to consider.
Yeah, absolutely. So the next couple of slides outline just a small portion of the Communities in Schools National Partnership Strategy, which, just like you said, the main focus is on our programmatic partners here. So from the poll, I know that a lot of you tuning in work directly with students. With there being so much work and so little time and resources, I know it's hard to imagine turning away organizations that are offering to provide programming or resources, but it's very important to make sure that you're staying true to your organization and making sure that you're vetting and partnering with the right organizations and corporations. So a little bit of background, Communities in Schools started this process by determining the 3 basic components that we're looking for in partners. 1, do they meet a need in our network? 2, do they have evidence-based research to back their work? And 3, do they have a national reach, meaning can they help all 160 so of our affiliates? So these are 3 main things that we look for in any organization that reaches out to us prior to even diving into this vetting process. So you'll see on this slide, it's a snapshot of our partnership framework. Phase 1 and 2 are considered our research and introduction phases, while phases 3, 4, and 5 are when we put these partnerships into action should they pass through phase 1 and 2. So obviously these slides will have a lot of CIS lingo in there, but the general idea of sharing this is to help guide and help start the conversations of putting a plan into place to be intentional about who you are partnering with as an organization. So for today's purposes, I'm going to just focus on the phase 1 and 2. just to give you an idea of how we at Communities and Schools vet partners and determine alignment. So on the next slide, you'll see our criteria for alignment. Again, this is going to look different depending on the organization, but there are the core buckets that I focus on when researching partners. So we've created what we like to call a partner profile, which I believe we're going to share after the webinar with all of you. But this partner profile addresses all of these key areas and really guides me in helping pulling together research on the partner organization so that when we go to our introduction meeting, I am prepared and I am ready to ask questions. That being said, the introduction meeting gives us a space to learn more about each of the organizations and dive into some of the stickier questions like short-term and long-term goals and how we can both benefit from partnering together. So the next slide outlines the importance of taking time to reflect on all the information that you've gathered and learned from the introduction call and all of your research. This space for reflection really helps me look at the potential partner from all angles. And this slide and the next slide actually go hand in hand in making sure that you are determining if and how this partnership could work prior to making the next move. This is prior to any partner agreements, any MOUs, anything of that sort. So on the next slide, you're going to see the rating system that just really helps guide me in deciding the next steps for the potential partnership. So obviously some of these are going to be no-brainers, but making sure that you take the time to reflect on the research and everything that you gathered from that introduction call, it really helps force yourself to rate each partner, and it's been very, very helpful for me over the last couple of years. All right, so this next slide is a little bit crazy. It might make your head swim a little bit, but it's the final step in determining the alignment with potential partners for Communities and Schools. So like I mentioned before, as you can see, the three main components that I'm looking for in the potential partners, the need, the evidence-based research, and the network-wide reach, they're listed at the top. So this map essentially just helps the CIS partnership team decide if we are moving forward with phases 3 through 5 of our partnership process, or if we're going to give a thanks but no thanks email or phone call. So making sure that you stay true to your organization's mission, goals, and short and long-term strategic plans, and being intentional with the programmatic and corporate partners is crucial to your success. And, you know, it's okay to have those tough conversations with potential partners and say, you know, this isn't the right time, or you don't meet an immediate need for us, or, you know, this just doesn't align with our mission and what we believe in, and that's okay. We as an organization cannot bend to the point where we're veering from our organization's goals just for the sake of partnering. Not all partnerships are great, and that's okay. You have to find the sweet spot in giving a little bit and being flexible. Pam, I know you have some thoughts around the flexibility in vetting some of the corporate partners at CIS. So I'm going to toss it on over to you.
Great, thanks for all of that, Ashlee. And I know we're running a little bit behind, so I'll be brief here. I just wanted to add that this process is, I think, so incredible. I don't think I've ever worked in an organization that has such a robust vetting process around identifying and evaluating partnerships in this way. I would also just add, I think this really highlights the importance of collaboration between fundraisers and program folks. And I say that because, you know, when I go out to talk to new companies or to, you know, begin expanding relationships with existing partners that we're working with, I don't necessarily approach the conversations with this framework in mind. I try to keep the conversation much more open and start from a place of trying to understand what the company's business interests are and how we can kind of match those interests and maybe help solve some of their challenges through mentoring opportunities.
Great. Thank you both, Ashlee, Pam. And then, Daniel, you have a partnership mapping tool as well. Would you mind just kind of walking us through this a little bit?
Sure, absolutely. And I would just reiterate what Pam just said. You know, what Communities and Schools has just shared with you and will be available to you after the webinar is such an amazing tool and a process that they've defined. Few organizations that I've come across have such a great tool. And so what we wanted to also give you, in the spirit of equipping you with something tangible that you could walk away from this webinar later today or tomorrow and start developing, is what you see on the screen is essentially a template So start building your own partnership mapping tool. So essentially what happens is on the far left side, you identify a handful of partners that you're interested. You've done your research. You have identified that they're aligned to what you're trying to achieve and think that you can add some value to them. And then you move across in the next 4 columns. The first 2, your needs and your wants, is what specifically you would input into those boxes, what specifically you think that you can provide to that particular corporate partner. And then the next 2, their needs, their wants, is specifically your value add. You know, kind of at the end of the day, what it is that you feel like you can contribute to them versus what it is that you need or want that they can provide to you. So is it financial resources that they can provide to you? Is it board leadership, pro bono support to expand your organizational capacity? And then in turn, what can you provide them? Can you help them with brand lift by helping people to be more aware of their presence if they're a small or mid-sized company in a community? Can you help them to provide leadership development opportunities for emerging leaders through board positions or a young professional organization that you might have as part of your network? Then what you do as you move across the chart is you identify what your core filter is. So for example, this is where you identify essentially your criteria for prioritizing partnerships. So you might be looking for companies that are willing to invest both time and treasure. So if they only want to write a check but not engage as volunteers, that would obviously be a factor that you would consider in terms of whether you want to move them forward or not. In terms of their network, if you know you want to grow your mentoring program over the next 2 to 3 years and they have a really limited network, or on the flip side, they have a really broad network with vendors and customers and other companies that are looking to them as a leader in the field, then that would be highly ranked in terms of saying that's going to be a corporate partner that's going to help us to expand beyond just that partnership. So you get the gist is sort of you identify your core filter, the things that are most important to you when evaluating your potential partnerships, and then you use that filter to go on the very last column and really rank or prioritize which companies you're going to approach first in terms of cultivating or building a relationship with them. So again, great tool that you can use to just start building that partnership, building map.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Daniel. That looks like an excellent tool. So we're going to move on and start talking about how to actually build these relationships and manage them, cultivating the relationship for maximum benefit. So to start off in this section, once programs have identified potential corporate partners, what are the best ways to cultivate those corporate relationships? Daniel, you have another wonderful tool, the partnership pit. Could you kind of talk to us about how we can use something like this to cultivate relationships?
Absolutely. So I think that through my experience, one of the hardest things that I found that mentoring programs struggle with is really being able to articulate in a very short and concise and targeted way why it is that they believe a partnership is necessary and what it is that they feel like they're trying to achieve in that. And so Opportunity Agenda developed essentially a 4-step process to create your own partnership pitch. And it essentially unfolds like this. You would start by casting a wide net by creating a vision that your litmus test is essentially with whatever vision you create or state, no one would disagree. So for example, I would say all kids deserve the opportunity for a caring adult. I think we all would agree. And so likely no one's going to disagree with the fact that all kids deserve a caring adult in their life. Then you move quickly to the problem. But the reality is 1 in 3 kids grow up today without having a caring adult in their life outside of their family. You move from the problem statement to the solution, so then you would position it to say, the fact is that companies in our community are looking for opportunities to achieve 3 things: business goals, community needs, and employee goals in terms of engaging their employees in a meaningful community experience. Mentoring is essentially at the intersection of those 3 particular goals that companies have in our community. So what's the call to action? The call to action is we're looking for companies to join us in helping us to both spread the word about the work we're doing, donate time as mentors, and or invest in our programs to reach more kids and raise more awareness. So you'll see in the very last part of it, you go from the wide net, everybody agrees with that statement, that vision statement. You clearly articulate a clear problem. You identify a particular solution that your organization is trying to move forward in line with its mission. And then you give a diversity of actions that go from low risk to higher risk meaning it's more engaged, more involved. So again, you notice I went from helping us just spread the word, following us on social media, opening us up to your networks, to donating time as a mentor, which is volunteering your time as a mentor in your program, to both investing your time and your treasure, which is a higher risk, higher engagement activity. And so it's just it's a simple sort of strategy or a simple framework for you to sort of take back to your organizations and think about, you had 30 seconds or a minute, how would you use this framework to articulate what you're looking for in your corporate partnerships?
Excellent. Thank you so much, Daniel. And Pam, do you have some thoughts on this as well? Once programs have identified their corporate partners, what the best ways are to cultivate those relationships?
I think the thing I would add here too, I'm sure there are other organizations who are on the line thinking about their limited staff capacity and ability to manage all these moving pieces. I know at communities and schools we pride ourselves on being a really lean team, but that comes with its challenges certainly. I think to the extent that there is opportunity to kind of spread the work around cultivating and stewarding relationships, all the better. One tool that I use often for that looks a lot like one of the tables that Daniel presented a few slides back, but a lot of times what we'll do is actually kind of put together a master plan for a corporate partnership, identify the key relationships within that partnership that are most important for us to work on over the course of the year, and identify some specific goals for each of those relationships, and then kind of assign those folks to point people within our organization. So that really creates kind of a holistic view of what we're hoping to do in terms of cultivation, but it also creates a little bit more shared accountability across various teams and individuals to help really cultivate the entire partnership, but also spread the work around a little bit more.
Excellent. So now kind of thinking about moving our partners along this continuum, this idea of a continuum of engagement. Daniel, could you walk us through this continuum partnership engagement kind of model that you use to talk about this, and then also just give us your thoughts on how we can do this?
Yep, absolutely. So again, sort of turning back to this idea of making sure that you are super clear as an organization or a program about what you want in terms of the partnerships you're trying to build. The continuum of engagement helps you to take that big picture, that big definition of what you want, measures of success, and begin to map it out. So what are all of the various stages that relationships that you have had that have been successful have followed? And so by breaking them down into smaller milestones, essentially what you're enabling your organization to do is to say, okay, we're going to meet partners where they are. So they're going to come onto this continuum on an on-ramp, if you think of it as a highway, at a space that's most comfortable to them. And what it enables you to do is by identifying specifically where they're coming on and where they're most comfortable, you're able to then say, what's the next most logical step for us to take this partnership from point A to point B, knowing that ultimately down the road we want to get them, to point S. But by breaking it into smaller chunks, you really are much more transparent, and you're much more clear about the steps that you need to take as an organization in managing that partnership to move them along the continuum. One thing that I will say, though, is it's not always a linear process. It's just a framework for us to think about how partnerships evolve over time, and being mindful of the fact that you meet people where they are. If they've never engaged in mentoring before, I've had great success in engaging companies in one-time episodic mentoring experiences. It's sort of like dipping your toe in the water on the continuum. They have a really positive experience. The employees walk away really excited about doing it again or getting more engaged. So then you move them to the next logical step up, which is maybe a more longer-term initiative or commitment. And so again, just piecing your work across this continuum helps you to essentially, it's like a roadmap for how you manage the partnership longer term.
Excellent. Thank you, Daniel. So let's think a little bit about documentation, because we all recognize that we need to document things and have things in place to make these successful partnerships. So Ashlee, what documents are important to have in place when we're developing and then maintaining these these partnerships and hopefully moving them along a continuum of engagement?
Sure. So I know I mentioned it before, the Memorandum of Understanding or Memorandum of Agreement, Partner Agreement, whatever you want to call it, it is crucial. So a couple of things for best practices when creating the MOU, set a timeline, whether it be a calendar year, a school year, whatever the case may be, set the timeline to make sure both parties stay on track. Another thing is setting goals and deliverables up front. I've learned over the past couple of years that if both parties are involved and able to give input, the better chances both will be able to stick to those goals. Another good best practice is to identify a point of contact. There is nothing worse than having too many cooks in the kitchen, so set a point of contact on both sides to avoid anything falling through the cracks or leaving any loose ends open. And then last but not least, set an expectation for check-ins and reporting. Do not wait until the duration of the MOU or partnership agreement is over to find out that it is not working on either party. Regular check-ins and open communication throughout the partnership is absolutely crucial to help you learn and grow as you go with the partnership. So the MOU, I cannot stress it enough. The other formal document that's very important to have, especially when working with youth, is the consent form. I'm sure that we all have some sort of parent consent form in place, but it has to be signed prior to receiving any services that I'm sure, again, all of us have. And then another thing that I just wanted to make a quick note of is background checks as well. It's a formal process, formal document, but just making sure that the mentor, mentee, all of those T's are crossed, I's dotted, and everything before you move forward.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Ashlee. So kind of keeping in line with documentation, data collection and evaluation is something that's, always kind of at the forefront of our minds. So what do companies want to know from mentoring programs, and what do mentoring programs want to know from companies? What types of data and information are important to report, and how do we really do this? So Meredith, why don't you kick us off on this question?
Sure, happy to. So first I will acknowledge, I know we all struggle with measurement, so I don't say this casually because I know it's complicated. It's complicated as a company to demonstrate ROI and return on investment of relationships that we develop with nonprofits and organizations to demonstrate the success we're having together. And I know it's challenging for organizations to crack the code of how to demonstrate the measurement and success that they're having ultimately with their beneficiaries. So I say, data certainly is important, and metrics are really important, and success factors and indicators are super important. I think if an organization maybe can't nail the specifics, obviously if you can nail the specifics and demonstrate very clearly the kind of impact that you're having, how you're programming or helping students get from A to Z, the outcomes that you're achieving, that's significant. I think we acknowledge, though, that it is challenging, and we, of course, struggle with this ourselves, as I mentioned. So if organizations can also show an intent to measure, and the processes and surveys, or, by whatever method makes sense for your organization, if you can demonstrate the intent to do that, we appreciate that as well. And frankly, as a professional services organization, measurement is something that we help clients with, and in many cases we've worked with organizations to actually help them, figure out the measurement capacity together. So, an intent and willingness and openness to measure, if you're not there yet, I think it's a really important starting point.
Thank you, Meredith. And Pam, do you have some thoughts on this as well?
I do. What I would add too is, again, going back to the beginning of the conversation, really digging into what are the company's goals around mentoring and employee engagement in general. So really understanding from their perspective how they're measuring progress, what's their capacity for coordinating, what types of strengths and skills are there folks bringing to the table, really, what are they hoping to get out of it. I think those early phase conversations can really help the fundraisers collaborate with the program team to determine what are those best metrics, how will that data be collected, how will it be evaluated, and how often. So, you know, there's a reason that Ashlee and I are on this call together. I think that close collaboration between program and fundraising is really critical to delivering on this piece.
Excellent. Thank you so much for your thoughts on that, Pam. So let's move into our last section on assessing impact and navigating challenges. So really understanding what the impact is of these partnerships and how to maneuver through the many challenges that we can experience. So first question, how can mentoring programs and corporations assess the impact and benefit of a partnership? Daniel, would you mind sharing your thoughts on how we can do this?
Sure, absolutely. So I think first and foremost, I think Ashlee mentioned this earlier and just want to reemphasize it. It's being clear with what your goals and your measures are from the very beginning. So as you form your partnership and you start the work together in that relationship, being mindful of what it is you're aiming to achieve in that partnership from the very beginning, the get-go, is super important to be able to track backwards and say, okay, so this is our beginning with the end in mind. This is our success measure. Where are we in terms of hitting that particular goal, and where do we need to maybe pivot or change our strategy to get there? And so I would just start by saying that. Second is being open to the unexpected outcomes. I think is really important as well. I'm working with another company right now, and they hired a third-party evaluator to assess their mentoring programs that work K through 12 in a particular school district out in California. And one of the things that they've discovered in the third-party evaluation that they didn't expect was the level of skill development in the areas of communication and collaboration for their mentors, their employees, and saw that through the HR data that was being assessed. So now the partners that they have in the community can use that information to talk about the fact that mentoring is not only helping to ensure that a young person gets the support and the guidance that they need, it's also developing in a very concrete, data-driven way the skill sets of employees who are engaging in those mentoring relationships. That was a completely unexpected outcome, and so if we're mindful as we analyze our data to start to identify the things that are not anticipated but helpful in terms of articulating the business case, frankly, for our programs, I would just call that out as well. And then lastly, just a huge shout out. I know that measurement and evaluation, as Meredith mentioned, is a huge challenge for companies and for nonprofit organizations alike. Mentor has a great tool called the Measurement Guidance Toolkit that looks at a whole variety of specific measures and tools that mentoring organizations can leverage to assess impact within their programs across 6 different domains, ranging from social emotional wellness to academic achievement and so forth. So I really would encourage everyone to check out that particular resource because it's packed full of example measures that you can leverage and use in your programs, as well as the tools to be able to assess those particular success measures.
Great, thank you, Daniel. That sounds like an excellent toolkit, and we will certainly be sure to include that in the information we send out about resources afterwards. Kind of, you know, within that same realm of thinking and kind of moving on, as we're thinking about, you know, how to assess, how do we know when it's actually time to scale or modify a partnership? So as we're doing these assessments, how do we recognize if it's time to change things a little bit? Daniel, could you actually share your thoughts on this as well?
Sure. So building off my last response, I would just highlight the importance of really evaluating and reflecting on 2 things together in your partnership. One is, as Meredith mentioned, the importance of the results. So what are you tangibly achieving in your program? How many kids are you able to reach? What impact are you having in those mentor matches? But also evaluating, and this is an area that a lot of times people don't spend enough time on, and that is the how. How are you actually achieving those results in terms of the strategies being employed, and how are you working together in your partnership? In other words, taking the time on a regular basis to hit the pause button in your day-to-day work as a partnership and say, what is working for this partnership? What are some of our challenges? What are solutions to overcome those challenges? When you do that, when you evaluate the what and the how, it will become clear as that relationship evolves and grows and gets stronger when it is time or when the opportunity presents itself to be able to scale, because that scaling factor will be mutual. You'll have the capacity on both sides, and you'll have the support in place on both sides to be able to move forward and scale in sync, as opposed to one being anxious to do it and the other feeling like they're sort of being dragged along. And the last thing I would just say is that trust, you know the partnerships that you really truly trust, which again is based on those relationships that you have with those champions from the nonprofit as well as from the corporation. And so ensuring that trust is in place will ensure that there is success as you are modifying your partnership or you're scaling the program.
Great, that's some great advice. So to kind of close out our conversation, I'd love to talk a little bit about challenges, because this is certainly something that comes up and something I think that our programs and all of our participants on the line would love to hear a little bit about what your kind of real-life experiences are with some challenges. So what are some challenges that you have encountered and how did you navigate? So Meredith, why don't you start us off on this?
Sure. So I think, as I mentioned, we just launched the virtual mentoring program. We're doing this in collaboration with Strive for College, which helps low-income students apply to college. And Dan and Mentor have been extremely helpful in building out a lot of the materials to support us in this endeavor. So there's a real-time challenge that we're facing right now, which I'll share with the group, and I'm sure you've experienced this in your own ways. So we have a cohort of super excited professionals like Deloitte, many of our Deloitte people. They're type A personalities. They're really excited to get involved, and they want to be the best mentors they can be. Dan has been really helpful in training them in how to think about how to be effective mentors. But one of the challenges we're facing is that by nature of the Strive platform, many of these students are coming on truly to just apply to college. Like that is the transaction they're looking to accomplish. And some of them need different ranges of help from mentors. And the challenge we're facing is that in some cases, and it's a small number, but you know, these are the situations that are rising to the top, we have mentees that are not being responsive to their mentors. So our people are super excited. They're trying to schedule a time for a conversation and exchanging emails, and they're coming up against mentees that are not being responsive. And then, of course, we have our mentors who are high achievers and want to understand what they did wrong to turn off their mentee or how they could have done it better. And I think what we're learning is that in some cases, some of these mentees are just truly looking to leverage some of the tools, get a little bit of support, and may not be looking for a full, robust relationship. So one of the challenges we're learning is about coaching our people to meet mentees where they are, to be flexible, to understand they may be matched with someone that's only looking for a little bit of support, and you know, we can match them with another mentee that might need more support. So different expectations on the part of the mentor-mentee is a real-time challenge that we're facing right now, and we're learning to navigate it, and we're honing our training materials to really address that.
It seems like expectations are just such a critical component of all of these partnerships, and really making sure that everybody has those clear expectations. Thank you for sharing that, Meredith. Pam, do you have any thoughts on this? Any challenges that you experienced and how you dealt with them in the partnership that you formed?
Definitely. I think a great example of this is something that we run into from time to time around mapping the capacity of the mentoring sites with the capacity of our programmatic reach in that area. So, for example, in some cases we may have a lot of interest from schools in a certain area to do something like sending students to a corporate site to do kind of an experiential day in orientation, but there may be less capacity from the company in that specific geography to take on a large group of students, and that can go both ways. So I think, again, you know, this just goes back to level setting with partners and keeping a really open line of communication, both with your partners and with your internal stakeholders and the clients who you serve. But I think that's something that definitely comes up often for us.
Excellent, thank you. And Daniel, would you mind kind of closing us out on this topic and help us to understand this ladder of inference that you use?
Yeah, absolutely. So as you all know from now, I like a lot of tools because I feel like they help us to use a common language in the partnerships that we have and we form. And so the ladder of inference is something I use in a lot of different partnerships, but essentially just to explain what it is, it's a tool to really keep partnerships grounded in the observable facts or in the data of what's happening in the partnership. So I went back to saying evaluating the what and the how is so important to being able to assess where you are, where you may need to troubleshoot and create some solutions or resolutions to issues that have arisen, and where you can continue to modify and scale your work together. The ladder of inference really is about grounding you in that data, in those facts, versus running the risk of moving up the ladder to a whole series of interpretations which then lead to what I would call interventions, right? Perfect example of this in a mentoring program is you have a corporate partner that comes on board, their corporate mentors don't end up showing up on a consistent basis for the mentoring program, and the conclusion is drawn that that company is like other companies you've worked with and they just don't care about mentoring, right? So you went from an observation, they're not showing up, they're not physically there, to a conclusion that you've made, right? It's an interpretation, they don't care about mentoring, and therefore I'm not going to invest any more time into this partnership. So you've moved all the way up the ladder to interpreting, which influences your actions, the way that you interact with that partner. If you stay grounded in the data, you would sit down with a group of mentors or sit down with the partners that you're working with at that company to understand what are some of the challenges facing the mentors in being able to get to the mentoring program. In that, you might discover that the employees are traveling frequently now because of a change in the business, right? And so maybe group-based mentoring would actually be a resolution to get more employees engaged, but to fill the gap where some employees are not able to show up on a consistent basis. You're still able to achieve your programmatic objectives. They're able to stay engaged because they truly do care about mentoring and about investing in the community. So again, it's just a tool that really, as you evaluate the how you're working together, you can use this to say, okay, so what is the data telling us about our what and our how? And what can we do to make sure that we're not drawing conclusions or we're not making assumptions, which over time is just what's called the reflective loop. It just triggers the way that you work with not just that company, but other companies that come into your partnership portfolio. So it's again, just a good grounding tool to get everybody on the same page and help you to navigate challenges, but move with a solution orientation.
This is great, Daniel. I think this will be really helpful and certainly help to navigate those challenges that will be inevitable in any of these partnerships. So thank you so much, panelists, for sharing through this facilitated discussion. That brings us to the end of our conversation, but now we have probably about 10 minutes for Q&A. So Melissa, do you have a few great questions to close us out?
Hi, thank you. And yeah, we got a bunch of great questions. We're probably not going to get to them all today, but my first one should be, and I'm going to ask this to all panelists one at a time, what should mentoring programs do if it seems like the partnership is not working out? And I'll ask this first to Meredith, please.
Sure. So this is a really this is a hard thing that we've faced in the past, and I would say there's probably not one solution or answer, and I would acknowledge, I know sometimes it's hard for organizations to break off a partnership with a company because oftentimes the company's also providing some support in the way of cash, and I know organizations often are, don't want to turn that away and also don't want to turn away a partner. But I will say we've been in the experience before, and I think, again, it's just if you've set up expectations or open dialogue and two-way conversations at the beginning and at the outside of the relationship, it shouldn't be such a hard task to have a conversation and identify what's not working and why it's not working, and if there's no solution, you know, to part ways. And, you know, I encourage organizations to not be afraid. You know, companies, I think, respect organizations more as a result of organizations being forthcoming and not trying to force something that's not working.
Great, thank you so much. And now, Pam, do you mind answering this?
I couldn't agree more with that last point. I would just add that I think for us the goal is always to do our best to make everything work on both sides, and feel really confident that we've exhausted all of our efforts and options before we take that big step of you know, deciding it's time to sunset our relationship. So I guess the few other things I would add to that, I think rule number one for me would just be communicate often and honestly. And then in addition to that, make sure to document things along the way and provide really tangible examples. I think it's just easier to have conversations when you're able to speak to the specifics.
Great, thank you so much, Pam. Okay, so we have another question, and this one I'm going to pose to Ashlee and Dan. Ashlee first. Having a corporate partner is a privilege and adds a lot of value to the program. Sometimes, however, the goals of our partner conflicts with the programmatic priorities and capacities. How obligated should a program feel to take on all opportunities from partners, even when they may conflict with the program's priorities?
So I'll take the first stab at that. At the end of the day, our students are the most important, and when the partnership is not helping our students, or it seems like it's hurting them and our goals are not aligned, the partnership is just not going to work out. And I think that all of us can agree that sometimes it just happens. I know that Pam can probably talk a little more about our corporate partners. So Pam, do you want to add anything to this question?
Ashlee, just to clarify, you said Pam, not Dan, right? I think they sound a bit alike.
Yeah. But I mean, going back to it, it's all about setting the goals in the very beginning and making sure that your MOU is stating your goals, your deliverables, things like that. And the open communication along the way is just, I mean, it is crucial. And going back to the last question that you asked, I wanted to add something on. I didn't hit unmute on time. When things are just not working out with partners, I just wanted to give a quick example of something that's happened with communities and schools recently. In one of our programs, our mentors weren't showing up, they were late, you know, things were just going a little bit downhill, and let's say that we were partnering with 40 of our sites. We then decided to scale back a little bit. We took some time to identify our stellar sites. We learned from them, we put a plan in place, and then we went back to the not so stellar sites, if that's appropriate to call them, and then kind of came up with a plan and put that plan in action, but we did try and scale back and then try again.
Great, thank you so much. Now, Dan, do you have a good answer for that as well?
Sure. I mean, I think just building off of what others have said, I would say, you know, as any nonprofit organization, you have the commitment to being good stewards of the financial investment that people are making in your mission, but you also have the obligation to being good stewards of people's time. And so I would just say, you know, it may feel awkward because you recognize that a partnership in terms of mentoring, relationship isn't working to the way that you thought it would. To be a good steward of your organization's mission, it's okay to do exactly what others are suggesting, which is to sit down and really get to the why behind why it's not working. Understanding those root causes will not only help you in that particular situation, but it will also help you to identify the core lessons that you can learn from there and apply to future relationships that you either cultivate or that you're already in. I would just add from my experience at Capital One that I had worked in the nonprofit field prior to going into Capital One, and so one particular strategy that I was very mindful of is if we felt like and came to a mutual decision that a partnership wasn't working for both of us, we were clear about establishing an exit strategy so that it wasn't a shock factor. So it wasn't about, you know, a call one day that says, nope, sorry, we're not funding you anymore and we're ending our relationship today. It was much more about, okay, so we know based on the consistent feedback loops that we've been having around the what and the how in our relationship, it's not working for both of us. And so let's talk through what the consequences of exiting this relationship are for both, and let's talk through how do we make sure that we're both taken care of as we move towards that conclusion point. So I would just add that as a key factor to throw out there to organizations thinking about potentially exiting a partnership. Give yourself a lead ramp to do that.
Great, and it looks like we have time. I was going to say, it looks like we have time for just one more question, Melissa.
Great, thank you so much. And actually, I'm going to pose this to Meredith. I'm wondering what grabs your attention as a corporate partner. You must hear from so many programs looking to partner, and I'm just wondering what makes a program stand out to you.
That's a really good question. I think we're looking for organizations that are innovative, so we're thinking about the latest trends or sort of needs in the community, so not necessarily just, you know, what's cool and hot, but also really responding to what critical issues are in the community and demonstrating how they're able to adapt their programs. I think we're also looking for organizations, again, that are flexible, so have figured out, you know, not necessarily a one-size-fits-all approach in working with corporate partners, but can demonstrate a diverse approach for how they work with corporate partners and coming up with strategies and different programmatic ways that they can adapt to work effectively with a company. You know, for us, we think about skills-based volunteerism in the sense of, you know, how we can truly leverage what our people do every day to apply to help our communities, and organizations that have mastered that, so have been flexible and thinking about who their corporate partners are and how their corporate partner skills can match the communities they're trying to serve, I think is something we're always looking for in an organization, and and would truly help an organization make an impact.
Excellent. Thank you, Meredith. Well, that brings us to the end of our Q&A. So thank you, Melissa, for running that for us, and thank you so much, panelists, for sharing all of this incredible information with everybody who's on the line. So to close us out, we encourage you to get no-cost technical assistance for your mentoring program. Whether you need help with recruitment, planning, program design, evaluation, or anything in between, you can request free technical assistance through the National Mentoring Resource Center. Wherever you're located, the NMRC can be there to help you. So additionally, we encourage you to register your program with the Mentoring Connector if you haven't already. This is a national database of mentoring programs. This zip code searchable database allows mentors and mentees from across the country to find your program, and is connected to LinkedIn, My Brother's Keeper, NBA Cares, and so many other avenues of free program advertisement. So as a reminder, 1 week after the webinar, all attendees will receive an email with a link to the Collaborative Mentoring Webinar Series webpage, where we will post the recordings, slides, and additional resources for you to access. So all this information from today will be up there so that you can actually check out and use those tools. Also, don't forget, we want your feedback. So at the end of today's webinar, please answer this short survey and help us to make the series even better. Visit the Collaborative Mentoring Webinar Series page on the Mentor website for an archive of all of the past webinars, information about upcoming webinars. And please encourage your corporate partners to consider attending the National Mentoring Summit Philanthropic Partnership track. Thank you to everyone for joining us today, and please join us next month for our awesome webinar, How to Leverage National Mentoring Month, which will be on November 17th from 1 to 2:15 p.m. Eastern Time. Thank you so much again, and we hope you have an excellent day.